Should you manage rental properties yourself? Oh my gosh, is this possible? We're actually talking about that on this channel. Yes, today we are. That's today's show. Let's dive into it. I've got a special guest on today's show. His name is Dave Spooner. He's the founder and CEO of Innago, which is a tenant management platform intended to help simplify the rental process for small to mid-sized landlords. And David, I have to say, this is something we haven't really ever talked about here on the show before because I'm all about passive income. I want a property management team really to be handling the fundamentals of tenant management. But you've built software, though, for people who, if they've got 1 to 5 rental properties, 5 to 10 rental properties, this must be a great solution for them. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So tell me, what was the gestation of this idea? You've been, I think, working on this for over 5 years now. How did you first come up with the idea to build this software? Because I have to say, a lot of the different softwares out there have not been very good. It's been frustrating for a lot of people.
Yes.
You must have, I guess, seen an opportunity to dive in.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it's kind of 5 years in the making, but Inago's actually only been around since January of 2017. So we're just 2 years old now as a company. I actually was involved in another company called College Annex, and our intention was to bring online listings to student housing. I'm sure a lot of landlords know student housing is really fragmented. They're trying to find a place to live for students, and they're very, very tech savvy. So they don't want to go door to door and, property management group to property management group. That ended up not working out for a variety of reasons I could dive into a little further. But the long story short is, landlords, the occupancy rate is so high in student housing that they were not willing to pay anything for that listing service. But as a part of that project, as a part of that company that we were trying to build, we did interact with a lot of landlords. We did speak to a lot of small to mid-sized landlords in that space. And in doing so, the major pain points that we were hearing were those rental technologies and turning really active processes into passive processes, just like you said, without necessarily having to use a property manager. So we saw the opportunity and we, like you said, looked at the software and said, there's really not a lot of great stuff out here. Tried a more modern, polished version of some things that other folks had attempted in the past. And we're pretty proud of what Innago has turned into.
So, all right, let's talk about some of those passivity items. And when you were talking with all of these landlords, you had the data, right? So you were interviewing small to medium-sized landlords. Maybe you could give me the top 3 biggest takeaways of talking to these landlords and compiling this data. What did they want to see? What were their pain points?
Yeah. Now, some of it is skewed a little bit towards student housing in those initial conversations, but a lot of it does project out to all landlords. So major pain points included, of course, collection of rent, collecting late fees and enforcing late fees. A really common story that we would hear from landlords is, tenant is late on the 1st. We have a late fee that kicks in on the 5th, and the tenant hasn't paid by the 5th. We call up the tenant. We say, hey, you're late. You better give us the original rent plus the $50 late fee, or we're going to start writing a 3-day notice and we're going to kick you out of the property. Tenant scrambles. They throw together the money. They send it off to the landlord. Landlord receives a check. They look at it. It's the original $500 with no late fee included. And they say, well, you know what? The threat worked. We'll move on. Problem is now the tenant knows that they can wait 5 days. They know that the landlord is going to call them, and they know that they don't have to pay that late fee. So it really becomes a vicious cycle, and you have no ability to enforce those late fees, and it's really challenging for the landlord to get that collection in on time. With automated services like Innago, we can really help with that. So that was one major pain point that we saw. Another major pain point was getting leases and documents signed, especially with student housing where you're adding parent guarantors, where maybe some of the kids are off on spring break. Maybe they've got, some co-op that's across the country. It's challenging to get those signatures down. And then finally, generally communicating with your tenants and establishing rules and guidelines is something that a lot of landlords felt they were lacking in as tenants were coming and going constantly.
Interesting. All right. So that communication with the tenants is incredibly important. I own properties all over the country. I don't manage them myself. My property managers do. But I'm sure, and I know, that they're having regular conversations with the tenants, right? They're like,
Absolutely.
oh, they love this house. They've been here for 5 years. There's a problem with the handrail. They'd like to get it fixed. Would you want to get this fixed? They're having these discussions, right? It's incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're exactly right. We always say kind of internally in Innago and talking to landlords that we speak with, you can control a lot of things about your investment, right? You can decide where to put your money. You can kind of project out what is the value of this property going to be in future years. The biggest variable in rental management is the tenants, right? And the biggest variable in managing tenants is establishing those lines of communication, making sure that they understand the rules of the property, that when rent is late, there's a late fee. When you're 5 days late, we're going to write a 3-day notice. And if you don't get your payment in, you're going to get kicked out. All those rules and guidelines need to be really clearly established, and that line of communication needs to be very straightforward.
So who is Innago for? If I've got 5 rental properties, is this perfect for me?
It is perfect for you, absolutely. So our smallest landlords have just a single unit. Our average landlord actually is 29.6 units, right on the nose. So skews a little bit larger than that. We do work with some larger landlords. One of the guiding principles as we've built Innago is that we wanted to build software that grows with the landlord. Most folks don't get into real estate investing thinking, well, I'm going to snag my one property and that'll be that. I'll just rent it out and that'll be my income stream. They want to grow a portfolio. And oftentimes software that does exist works great for 1 unit, 2 unit, or it works great for 1,000 units. But in between and along that journey, there's nothing that really satisfies the landlord. So we tried to build Innago with that in mind. And it scales really nicely. Our largest landlords have 700 units. Our smallest landlords have just a single unit. But our typical landlord is in that 1 to 15 range, I would say.
I think one of the big things that I've always railed against is the passivity piece of this, right? Because for a lot of people, if you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're busy, right? You're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. You don't have the time to create another job for yourself, which is what property management can turn into. So very often what happens is people get started in real estate investing. They own one property and they're managing it themselves, right? It was the town home that they bought with their wife when they first got married. Then they move because they're having kids. They keep that first property and they rent it out. And I think this is pretty easy because we're kind of renting it to a friend. But I always say that's sort of the allure of the first property syndrome.
Sure.
And then they want to get that second property. And they're like, well, I'm managing the first one. Might as well manage the second one. And then the third. And then you're creating a job for yourself. So let's talk about some of the areas where you identified the job for yourself, moving it into passivity. I guess chasing down, getting leases signed, making sure tenants are paying on time. But there's got to be some other levels here that Innago takes over for you and kind of grows with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the things that I've mentioned so far are all things that the landlord is very much actively participating in, right? Communicating with the tenant, setting up those late fees, setting up those rules and responsibilities. Another large piece of it, and we call this, it's really about finding the right tenants, right? So screening your tenants is a critical piece of this. And if you can find the right tenants, then you don't have to worry about a lot of these challenges quite as much. So we partnered with TransUnion, for example, and we run credit, criminal, and eviction history on every single tenant. And we instruct landlords, get strict with your rules. You want to find good tenants because good tenants are going to be easy renters, and they're going to make those active jobs that you have a lot more passive.
Right. They're going to stay a lot longer too. And it's going to be on you then to keep finding new tenants over and over and over again.
Turnover is expensive.
Yeah, turnover can be very expensive. So let's talk about some of the maintenance items that might pop up. How does your software deal with some of those items? Cataloging, keeping track of, 123 Main Street, we had to fix a furnace, keeping all of that in one place. How does Innago work for me in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. It does support maintenance ticketing. Both you as a landlord and the tenant can submit those maintenance tickets. And whenever you submit a maintenance ticket, you can choose whether or not you want the tenant to see it. So if it's something like, we need to replace this furnace, maybe you don't want to make the tenant aware of that immediately. You want to schedule that out. You could keep that private just on your end. Anytime a tenant does submit, it's sent directly to you, and you can communicate back and forth with them. They can add pictures, they can add video, which is really great. They can, of course, add a description. You can forward that on to your maintenance person who can then deal with it. You can also add invoices to those maintenance tickets. You can check past, the history of a particular tenant. Are they sending a lot of maintenance tickets through? There's a lot that you can do there with that maintenance piece.
Perfect. Now, what about the tenant relationship with Innago? Is this something that they ever see? Are they interacting with this software at all? And are they able to log in and see that, hey, my rent was paid and I do have a receipt for that rental payment. I've heard of some terrible landlords that we've worked with, some terrible property
Yeah.
managers over the years. One particularly comes to mind that was, accepting cash payments, but not actually and then issuing receipts to tenants, and
Yep.
just a nightmare. So how do you guys handle that piece?
Absolutely. That's a huge piece of it. And, I talked about you want to establish that communication channel and establish that professionalism. That's a really big piece of it. And if you have professional software, even if you have just a couple of units, the experience of the tenant is going to be the same as if you were a large landlord, right? The first time they interact with Innago, they have their own portal that they can log into. They can set up their bank account or credit card to submit payments. They can sign up for auto debits. They can see that entire history of payment invoices that they've received and submitted in the past. All their documents are stored online. So if they've signed a lease through Innago, they can see it. If there's some other document that you've chosen to upload, whether it's a pet addendum or, the notice of evicting, that can also be uploaded to Innago and communicated directly to the tenant. And they can, of course, submit their maintenance tickets from their phone and also see all those past maintenance tickets.
Oh, that's great. So very
Yeah.
thoughtful walkthrough. So we're going to have a special link below this that everyone can check out Innago and see if it's a fit for you. Highly recommend checking it out and see if it could really work with you as you grow your rental portfolio. Dave, I'm curious, in the 2 years since it's been live now, well, it's 2019, it's been live for now 2 years. What pain points, growth as an entrepreneur did you experience building this business? Let's talk about first minimum viable product when you launched it.
Yeah.
How has it evolved over 2 years? What feedback did you get from landlords and tenants?
Yeah, tremendously. That's a really good question. So the minimum viable product that we wanted to put out was really focused on that payment piece of it. We had that payment built out pretty robustly. There was a lot there. We had late fees. You could track all the invoices. Tenants got their own portal. But beyond that, there wasn't a whole lot else. So we focused on that payment piece first. We added a little bit on the document side, but we didn't have screening. We didn't have very strong communication channels. The focus was really just kind of getting that product out and giving something that could, to landlords, that could help them affordably offer online payments and online document storage and signing. Since then, we've added a ton. And I would say one of the biggest features is, as I mentioned, that tenant screening. That was a lot of feedback from landlords. A lot of landlords said, screening them in another product, or for me at just 5 units, even setting up a screening service is really cumbersome. It's challenging, and I'm getting a lot of bad tenants. I need that product as a piece of Innago in order to use Innago as a service. So that was one of the first things that we prioritized, built out in Innago. And beyond that, we've added a lot of other features, better communication tools, more powerful maintenance ticketing, better security, better privacy, all that good stuff included there.
What about advertising for tenants, finding them in the first place? Are you integrating it all with like Craigslist or Zillow, or how are you guys handling that? Or is that something separate?
At this stage, it's mostly separate. We do have some levels of integration there. So we're currently working. That's one of the next big offerings we're planning on adding is we call it market syndication. And you tap into those Zillow syndication, Craigslist as well. There's a bunch of them that you can jump on and put those listings out there, which is really great. It's a great feature, a very sensible feature, and something we absolutely plan on adding. In the meantime, we use, particularly with our application service, something called a public URL. So instead of specifically sending an application to a tenant, the landlord can take that public URL and slap it in their Zillow listing or their Craigslist listing or any other listing that they have out there. They can put it on their website if they have a website, and any tenant can go in, click that link, and pull up, again, a very professional looking, polished application template. It's not just a PDF that was uploaded. It's an online form that they can fill out and submit their application directly to the landlord. So while we're not facilitating directly that syndication, we're not putting the listings out there, we are allowing you to connect to those listings so that folks that come through are passed directly into Innago.
Perfect. Well, hey, as the company grows, you think about these extra bells and whistles you can add on. So fantastic work so far. So Dave, let's talk cost. So if I'm thinking about doing this, one of the reasons that someone wants to manage their properties themselves is they don't want to pay the 8 to 12% per month to a property management company, the screening costs and all of those things. So if I take on Innago, what could I be looking at as like a monthly or yearly cost to use the service?
Yeah, we've got a really unique setup. as far as cost is concerned. What we found is that one of the biggest hindrances for landlords in getting set up with tenant management software is the initial setup fee, right? The barrier to entry that those fees represent. So we completely removed it. We took out setup fees. We took out monthly fees, yearly fees. We don't even have a contract. There's no fee associated directly with using Innago. And that includes online leasing, the tenant screening, communication, recording payments, giving your tenants portals, etc. The only piece that we charge for in Innago is when your tenants pay online. So when a tenant pays online, we take 1% the total transaction, capped at no more than $5 for the entire rental unit. That's for your first 25 units, and it's just $1 a unit after that. So if I could do a quick example, just
that's crazy, but yeah, please.
Yeah, let's say you've got a 4-bed single-family residential, and there's 4 young professionals renting it out. They each pay $500, $2,000 total. Doesn't matter if they pay by credit card or e-check. Doesn't matter if all 4 pay online or one guy pays the full transaction online. We're going to $1,995. So just that $5 fee if it's one of your first 25 units. If it's your 26th unit, it's just $1.
That's amazing. Well,
yeah.
Good on you guys for figuring out that pricing model, because you guys have to eat. You guys have to make money building a great business. But people don't like to be nickel and dimed with this payment, this payment. So that's a great way to look at it. Good on you. Well, fantastic. Again, we'll have a link below this video and this audio so people can check it out and sign up and see if it's a fit for them. Dave, if there's anything you think we missed, any other ways people can connect, please let us know.
Yeah, you can find us on social media at Innago Software. That's both Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And yeah, feel free to reach out by phone, by email. My email is very simple. Most people in Innago, it's the same. It's just my first name, Dave, D-A-V-E, @innago.com. You can feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to chat.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And thank you so much for doing as much of the bulk of talking as possible with this head cold that I have. I appreciate it. I said to Dave before we started, please, just you gotta run with it. I'm gonna sit and listen as much as I can. But my thanks, Dave, for joining us. We really appreciate it, and good luck to you with Innago in the new year.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
You bet. You bet. And my thanks to all of you for downloading and subscribing and making us one of Inc. Magazine's top business podcasts as well. Please hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. Our whole goal is to help you build financial intelligence here on the channel and to build passive income, ultimately leading to financial freedom. We'll see you next time, everyone.